So, 155 of the illumination text. In the middle of the page, Nagarjuna's treatise. And it's also called Madhyamaka. And this is one of the justifications for taking in the title Madhyamaka-avatāra, Candrakīrti's entrance or introduction or supplement to Madhyamaka, that Madhyamaka means Nagarjuna's treatise. Because Candrakīrti often refers to it as Madhyamaka. That's all. From the Madhyamaka, Umale. That's not the only justification. And it either is an introduction or a supplement, adding topics on that were, I have to speak very, very carefully, which I can't at this point. Extensively explained in Nagarjuna's treatise, but were more extensively explained in Candrakīrti's text. But for instance, the reasonings proving emptiness are more extensively explained in Nagarjuna's text than they are in Candrakīrti's. Candrakīrti, it's often said that he wanted to make sure that people understood that persons had to ascend over the 10 bodhisattva grounds. So maybe I should research that a little and give a more careful description. Nagarjuna's treatise on the definitive meaning should be taught just so it eliminates anyone else, to those who through prior cultivation, which would have to mean in other lifetimes for the most part, right? Could mean earlier in this lifetime, other lifetimes, have established seeds in their mental continuums, in other words, have established predispositions for the realization of emptiness. It should not be taught to others, for even if they have heard texts that teach emptiness, they have thoughts wrongly oriented with respect to emptiness. And hence teaching it to them is disastrous. It's not just troublesome or problematic. It's disastrous. With respect to how such disaster comes about, some through lack of skill abandon emptiness. They say, "Oh, this is foolish," and thereby go to a bad transmigration and born rebirth, because the act of abandoning emptiness is worse than not having heard the text. Why is it so bad that it causes you to be reborn as an animal, a hungry ghost, or a hellbeing? Is he saying that those who abandon emptiness become too nihilistic? I don't think so.
It says that in the next sentence.
Others, erroneously apprehending the meaning of emptiness, which only means that inherent existence doesn't occur, think that they have nihilistic thoughts, right? So these people, they don't have nihilistic thoughts. They say this talk about emptiness is ridiculous. I'm going to hold the opposite. Well, why is it so bad to hold the opposite? I mean, it's bad to hold, look, if the conception of inherent existence serves as the root of all suffering, right? The root of all sickly existence and the root of the obstructions to omniscience, both the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. The conception of inherent existence is awful, right? But we all have that. Right. So why is it so bad the doctrine of emptiness, that's crap? Which means the conception of inherent existence is good. But we're all doing that anyway. So why should it be any worse? Well, wouldn't it be then that you might just go on as usual, but not be able to, not for aeons and aeons and aeons, meet with the doctrine of emptiness again?
Creating obstacles to meeting with the doctrine of emptiness as well.
We're creating obstacles to meeting with the doctrine of emptiness, yes, but does that mean you'd have to be reborn as an animal, or a hungry ghost, or a helping? there's still a connection there that you have so gone against the truth, right? Of course, you might, I mean, take it for granted that it might just be trying to scare people and wanting to come on our side. So I'm trying to penetrate whether there's actually any meaning. So you've so gone against the truth, but you really haven't identified the truth or haven't properly and gone against it. Anyway, interesting. Others, erroneously apprehending the meaning of emptiness, which is only the non-establishment of appearing existence, think that these phenomena simply don't exist, or in another way are non-existent. Some Tibetans made a difference between Yerba-Mayin and Meba. And it would be like making a difference between, well, we've got it right here, do not exist and non-existent. Yeah, I'm struggling to come up with the words. So that you can see is view of nihilism, right? And then you easily, not easily, you would have fallen from a doctrine of cause and effect. You wouldn't engage in virtues in order to be reborn in a happy migration. You wouldn't avoid non-virtues, right? Does it say ever what happens to them? A number of times in this section, these two, we're going to have two errors, right? First, they generate the wrong view, deprecating all things, cause and effects. Then, since they do not give it up, this view increases more and more. It's said, with regard to the nihilists, this "it's said" means, in this case, the habit of the Tantric College of Lower Casa non-ignorance, that there are two motivations, I think it's based on Jansha, two motivations for propounding the doctrine of nihilism. One is to help others, to relieve them of the burden of, giving to churches and just wasting your time in these difficult activities. And the other is exemplified by a teacher who wanted to sleep with his daughter and so taught that there's no moral cause and effect. And of course, we do that a lot. That's you sort of work out a rationalization for the things that you want to do. And the rationalization may be better than your older thought, or it may be worse than your older thought, right? Others, we have first in knowledge and truth, those of little wisdom or harm. He himself said, when their view of emptiness is faulty, when they don't understand it right, just as harm comes to those faulty holders, they have faulty views of knowledge mantra. If you want to pick up a snake in order to get its venom to use it in medicine, and you pick it up wrongly, right? You get bitten by the snake. Knowledge mantra, specifically here, it's probably in order to cast a spell on someone else, and it ends up harming you, I don't know. Furthermore, Candrakīrti's clear words commenting on this says, in order not to follow the extreme deprecating conventionalities, it's necessary not to undermine actions in their effects, which are like reflection. So somehow, despite the tremendous force of this reasoning, which does not find phenomena, doesn't find. It's not that while you're doing this reasoning, you find something that's like a reflection. It doesn't find the phenomenon. And you go off into what's called space-like meditative equipoise. It's called space-like because you don't find anything. So somehow, phenomena are not entirely refuted. And two, in order not to fall to extreme of superimposing ultimate existence, necessary to see that actions and their effects pertain only to things that lack inherent existence. So the opposites of those are the extremes of annihilation and permanence. So permanence doesn't have to mean that you're holding, let's say, the cup exists permanently. Very important point. Get beyond this right now. Extreme of permanence just means to exaggerate, in one way, it's to exaggerate what does exist. So if you consider the cup to inherently exist, then you're stuck in extreme permanence, which means we're stuck in extreme permanence. Extreme annihilation is to deny the existence of something that does exist. So inherent existence doesn't exist, so one way of describing the extreme permanence is to hold that something that doesn't exist does exist, right? The extreme annihilation is to hold that something that does exist doesn't exist. And therefore, all systems, I don't know, economic and so forth, down the line are trying to zero in on what actually does exist without superimposing something that doesn't, and without deprecating something that does exist. All right? Every system wants the middle. The middle is the truth, not half and half. So then Tsongkhapa complains about, he says, Candrakīrti says that one who considers compositional phenomena to be non-existent has a wrong view. All right. Hence, even though there is a verbal distance, O you Tibetans, between not-existence, mera, and not being existent, yoba mayimba, the appearance of the mind of non-existence does not differ at all from the appearance of the mind of not being existence. And quit being foolish about it. But now, doesn't this deny the famous tetralemma? Not exist, not exist, not both exist and not exist, not neither exist nor not exist. It's an idiocy, isn't it? If it's not exist and not exist, then it ought to be the fourth one, shouldn't it? Neither exist nor not exist, right? Should be the fourth one.
It depends on how you interpret that part one.
Yes.
I'm thinking of Noah Belden's interpretation.
Right.
You familiar with it, Jeffrey?
No.
Noah Belden was actually commenting that is from Nagarjuna's Madhyamaka Seminar. It says the Buddha taught that all are real, not real, are real and unreal, and are neither unreal nor real. And
Well, we should get into this later.
okay.
Okay? There are many ways of handling it. Candrakīrti, in commenting on Aryadeva's point, I don't want to, I'm cutting him off, obviously, but I don't want to cut people off in general, okay? Just him. Not just this time. Don't get the idea that, when we need to just move on, I'll say, well, let's do that later. That's like, well, maybe we'll get to it later or not. No, we'll get to it later. It's no question. That's one of the many ways. I translated that with John Book. Candrakīrti, in commenting on Aryadeva's 400, says, blah, blah, blah. No. So, on hearing the teaching of selflessness, the one just goes to a bad transmigration. So on hearing the teaching of selflessness, the unwise abandon it or realize it incorrectly. I see both of them go to a bad transmigration. Easy to understand how The person who understands emptiness as denying the existence of phenomena would go to a bad transmigration. But you have to understand the steps, right? Once you hold phenomena as not existing, you're going to hold the cause and effect don't exist. Once you hold the cause and effect don't exist, there will not be anything like ethical action. There will not be any way, but not just ethical action, actions of giving, ethics, patience, which are the foundation of making a good life in the future. A teacher was asked, it is said, what do you say? Non Langdon said, one of my teachers said, whether it's true or not. So a teacher, it's an Indian who came to Tibet in the 11th century. He was asked, what happens if you engage in a lot of virtuous actions, but don't aim it toward future lifetimes? And he answered, you'll be born in a bad transmigration. Now when you think about the meaning of that, it's that you then will use up all of those effects in this lifetime. They will have all of their effects in this lifetime. It's a little hard to believe that. You would think that the mind would become so imbued, for instance, with helping others, that when you were reborn, you would want to help others, that you wouldn't just end up with terrifically marvelous circumstances in this lifetime. Whether you intended it or not, I mean, you're going to be there in the next life. There'll be some being there. So
the seeds of karma also, they don't ripen in sequence or in a particular time. It kind of goes through. It seems like you wouldn't have any guarantee that you could get them all ripened before you die.
I wouldn't think you'd have any guarantee you'd get them all ripened before you die. But it's not that the sequence is just confused. It's what's stronger, what is more proximate, and I forget. If you take to mind the future life, and you dedicate and you think, this is going to have effect in the future, then that probably would have more effect. I don't know. But it seems to me that a teacher was exaggerating. I don't know.
Generous activities could come to fruition in a bad transmigration.
Could come, yes, true enough. So it's said that it's only through ethics that you're reborn as a human, or in a good transmigration, especially as a human. So does that somehow interfere with ethics? This person is engaged in virtue, not just of giving and so forth. For instance, it said if you give a lot and you don't have a system of engage in ethics, like purposely restrain from killing and sustain life, then you could be reborn as a dog that's very wealthy, living in America, right? Somebody to take care of it. So, both go to bed. To realize emptiness erroneously is emptiness signifying non-existence. How many times does he need to say it? Therefore, but there is emphasis that comes through repetition, and you get the point. Therefore, when prideful persons, I've often thought that almost anybody engaged in Buddhist studies in the United States is prideful, arrogant. I sort of like, when I notice that somebody's arrogant, I could probably be a good student. Who lack the mental capacity to distinguish the very subtle meaning of emptiness and yet fancy that they have such capacity. So maybe that's the type of pride. Oh, I understand. I understand it all, that sort of thing. Develop a strong facsimile of belief in the mere words of the profound meaning, which actually is unsuited to their faculties. This leads to disaster. What does that have to do with the first sentence in the paragraph? Realize emptiness erroneously is to apprehend the meaning of emptiness signifying non-existence. Therefore connects it to that sentence. Paragraphs are added by the translators.
What else could an erroneous realization of emptiness lead to but non-existence? Right?
It's not likely to lead to permanence to that extent.
Really?
Oh, all the other schools have an erroneous understanding of emptiness. They are not refuting enough. So they thereby affirm the inherent existence of objects and thereby fall to an extreme of permanence. So it means in this context, it means to, they're not going to end up in a bad transmigration. In this context, however, where he's talking about people who erroneously understand emptiness and are reborn in bad transmigration, is to misunderstand emptiness as denying the existence of phenomena. You're holding emptiness to mean non-existence, and you haven't penetrated any more than the words, right? And you think, I've really understood it. Question: how can one tell who to teach emptiness to, right? To indicate that one can ascertain this through external signs, Candrakīrti says, even while an ordinary being, on hearing about emptiness, inner joy arises again and again. Wow, emptiness. Tears arising from this happiness moisten the eyes and the wisdom by stand on it. That does happen when you hear there's going to be such and such, right? That sometimes very moved and so forth. Such persons have the seed of the awareness of perfect Buddha. They are vessels to achieve suchness. Emptiness is called suchness because it remains such whether it is realized or not. The ultimate truth is taught to them. So what is the awareness of perfect Buddha? In this case, it's non-conceptual exalted wisdom. Direct cognition of emptiness.
But doesn't everyone have the seed for that?
Oh. Doesn't everyone have the Buddha nature? Yes, but seed, I think in this case, this is a very good point, means activate. You know, I was going to say somewhat activated, but, you know, right?
The conditions, causes and conditions are there too.
Yes, through cultivation in other lifetimes, through having engaged in altruism. So, then of course, he has to discuss what happens when these signs aren't there. If these physical marks are seen, are seen to arise when a person has the composite, well, it's not enough to be overwhelmed with, wow, discourse on emptiness. It has to be on the occasion of having heard non-erroneous discourse on emptiness, number one. Wow! Now, given that the various Gelugpa colleges argue amongst each other about what non-erroneous discourse on emptiness is, as one, the American or English monk in Hong Kong said to me, oh, so only the J College of Sarah has the proper interpretation. He didn't just say that properly. He said only they could overcome inherent existence, the conception of inherent existence. I went, how partisan could you get? And didn't misunderstand it. You heard it and you didn't misunderstand it and you're overwhelmed by it. Then that's an unambiguous sign. Wow. I mean, it sounds like you'd be pretty close to realizing emptiness. Who cares about signs? And then you would have already heard the discourse, right? We're talking about those to whom you should teach it.
Right.
This is
How do you
suggesting.
get that way?
Yeah.
If you can't teach emptiness to those except for whom when they hear it, they heard, their hair standing on because they already heard it.
It
Correct?
seems he's overqualified. Now that's the sort of thing we'd have to ask him, right? Meditate, achieve a meaning with someone. If the meaning is not understood, or even if understood, these marks do not arise. The sentence is weird. The second part of it you can understand. even if understood, these marks do not arise. One cannot determine that they're vessels for sure. If it's not understood, and the marks don't arise, you can't determine, I see, for sure, that they are, I mean, why would you even think, oh, I see, if the meaning is not understood? I'm just being thick-headed. If I can't understand this part of the text, how can I understand it? That's not. Still, if they will not depart from what is set out by an excellent Lama. In other words, you've got a teacher and you arrogantly, you have a qualified teacher and you arrogantly say, no, it's entirely wrong. It's not that way at all. That's not what Tsongkhapa said, and so forth. So if the person, I don't think that this is necessarily asking for subservience. In one way it is. Because you're supposed to question, right? But it means if you're not so arrogant that you won't say, oh, no, that's wrong, I've already got it down. They're suitable vessels for newly infusing many potencies. So he's taking care of all those people whose body hairs didn't stand on end, tears didn't well from the eye.
What is he saying?
It's like if they're willing to become part of a tradition rather than, isn't it?
They're willing to stick with it, basically. I think.
I see. Stick with it, not just arrogantly go off on their own track. So, teaching emptiness to listeners such as described above will not be fruitless. The good qualities that follow from hearing this teaching will arise for them. What are those good qualities? Very clearly set out on the next page. Clearly set out there. Those who are vessels of teaching of emptiness consider hearing about the view of emptiness to be like finding a treasure. I must say, for me, it certainly was like that. It was just an incredible treasure to hear about emptiness. And so if you have any sense at all, to prevent that view from deteriorating even in other rebirths, they adopt ethics. Because, as we learned earlier from Candrakīrti's his supplement or introduction to Nagarjuna's treatise, there is no other cause for a good transmigration and ethics. And always abide in ethics. So you can see in Candrakīrti's view, I mean, this is now Tsongkhapa's words, but you can read Candrakīrti's root verse itself. Plus, in Candrakīrti's commentary, it's very clear, just like what is being said in Tsongkhapa's commentary. There's nothing at this point particularly Gilupa about the commentary. Concerning this, they think, if through the circumstance of faulty ethics I fall into a bad transmigration, I can't keep studying emptiness. So, having been taught that there's no other cause for a good transmigration than ethics, they adopt it, they take up a system of proper ethics and guard against its degeneration.
Now, wouldn't it be a question what proper ethics is?
Refraining from the 10 non-virtues, engaging in the 10 virtues, that's the basis. Then there's two types of non-virtues. Those that are natural non-virtues, and those that are non-virtues because you have sworn to a code of conduct, such as as a monk or nun, you can stay on a bed only about so high. And it becomes a non-virtue if you stay on one higher. In Tibetan, Ranshingi Kanamatoa-tan, Jebe Kanamatoa-ni. Kanamatoa probably means something like not high in the mouth, unseemly, so natural unseemliness is. And Jebe Kanamatoa, Jeba means made up. Jeba. Formulated unseemlinesses. So he's saying, don't think that you have to have sworn to a code of ethics in order to have faulty ethics. There are actions that are natural. Then, person thinks, through maintaining proper ethics, I'll be born having transmigration. Gee, will you be born necessarily in the next one in happy transmigration? Yet if I'm poor, I was thinking of as I was reading this morning, of graduate students. But you're not that poor, right? Yet if I'm poor, I'll be bereft of necessities, such as food, drink, medicine, and clothing. But sometimes it gets that way. Like you don't have time to study because you have to work so much. Due to my being preoccupied with seeking these, right? If you think of all the people in the world, what is the world? What is it? 5.6 billion or something like that? What percentage are oppressed? You know, they're humans, but they're poor, either due to food, drink, medicine, or clothing. Wow. Due to my being preoccupied with seeking these, I won't be able to continue hearing about the view, meditating on its meaning, and so forth. Thus, they give gifts to people above themselves, guru types and so forth, and low fields. Poor people. Are poor people just viewed as low? No. They're viewed as high because they serve as a field of merit for yourself. So they're valued. But being to a low field is superior to a high field. For a particular person, certainly for a sangha, they're giving to the low field. So something you thought was a low field was superior to giving to the high field. You can see the corruption that would then set in. That we get an organized church, and the organized church, we get greedier and greedier, and say, well, you get much more merit if you give to us than to some other group. And then they're not high field. They're not high field. So you think they're low field. So it depends on the motivation of the person who's giving, right?
The motivation of the person receiving as well.
That's what I'm saying. Here, I'm assuming the motivation to be lousy. Okay?
If you thought of them as a high field and you gave in that way.
Yes, thought of high field and gave to high field. But then it would be much smarter to go out and give to the poor, thinking of them as high field.
Wouldn't be wrong
really
view.
Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in disguise.
Wouldn't be wrong view to give to a high field, thinking they are high field and they're not.
Oh, in that case, I don't think so. Because, especially if you're just purposely doing it, but the misidentification of a person, I don't think is sufficient to cast a wrong view. I always used to think of monks and nuns as, sort of living off the communist view. They're living off the fat of the populace, the wealth of the populace. And then I found out that they're praying, studying, and so forth all day, all night. Almost, before I got up and after I went to bed, they were still at it. And the food that they're eating is really, no, not just that it was Tibetan food, that's not my concern. It was very, very poor, they had very little of it. And they even had a macho thing where you shouldn't go out and beg in the monastic colleges in Tibet. You shouldn't go out, you shouldn't waste your time. You should study, study, study. But then there's the sort of monastery as an institution, also some people within it are living like kings. Thinking, the view of emptiness induces Buddhahood when conjoined with great compassion, and not so if it's not conjoined with great compassion, so they cultivate compassion. Then they think through anger. One goes to a bad transmigration. Anger destroys so much. Anger is a non-virtue itself and destroys so much virtue. Virtue is destroyed. One acquires a very ugly complexion. Say you're born as a human, you end up with a very bad complexion. You know, so that when people see you, they go, ugh. And so that makes trouble for you, you know? Kids pick on you. It's terrible. Because of this, superiors are displeased. Now this is weird. Arrogance. People who realize emptiness are displeased because you're so ugly? What does it mean? Because you're so ugly, or because you have had so much anger? Earlier it said that, I don't know, something, superiors arrive where people give gifts, you know, so you'll be taught. It is true that if you have a lot of money, you can sponsor a teaching. But I don't think, well, at least from my point of view, I wouldn't like it to mean that the superiors are displeased because you're ugly, but because you have so much anger. Ethics and so forth are not dedicated again and again toward attainment of omniscience, will not become cause of attaining Buddhahood. Will not uninterruptedly give rise to the measurable effects of a healthy body, resource, and so forth. Therefore, we also fully take a virtue that acts also toward enlightenment. For the sake of, once you become a Buddha, releasing transmigrating beings from cyclic existence. It's really, you know, goes into tremendous detail. It's not just perfunctorily said, oh, somebody who likes the doctrine of emptiness also engages in virtue. Respect bodhisattvas. So, 159 in the middle. Otherwise, if something else is taken as the manner of having found the view, this non-existence, it's very hard. With this reasoning, you don't find objects. It's very hard not to become nihilistic. And all presentations of actions and their effects, such as ethics, come to be seen as like counting the creases in the horn of a rabbit. I like that. This being so, one mistakenly thinks that such teachings are for the sake of those who have not understood emptiness. Oh, those are just preliminary teachings. Don't bother with altruism, but are necessary for those who have realized emptiness. And you end up taking all conceptuality to be conceptuality that is involved in the apprehension of true existence. Now we're going to explore this later on. It almost seems as if all conceptuality is, to me, almost, that all perception is involved. Because even the Gelugpas say, in all of our perceptions, things appear to be inherently existent. It's just that with our consciousness, when you think, oh, I'm going to go out that door, that doesn't necessarily involve an apprehension a holding on to the inherent existence of the door. But that there are other thoughts that approve of the seeming status of the door. And those are conceptions of inherent existence or true existence. But the others aren't polluted with fault, even though the door appears to have this status.
Is the difference between like a direct prime cognition and like an inferential sort of thing? Is it
No.
logical or-
Even, I mean, inferentially, or just you think I'm going out the door, that's just a conceptual consciousness. Is that, you know, where are the doors? Somebody says there's a door over there, there's a door there. That's erroneous. There's a door there and there's a door there. Now, if you say there's an inherently existent door there and there's an inherently existent door there, if you can see that, then those two are erroneous. But if you can see this door there and door there, those are not erroneous. But do we know of a door that isn't inherently existent? That's my question. Now, Tsongkhapa is not claiming that you're saying there's a non-inherently existent door there and a non-inherently existent door there. You're saying you're referring to a door that's qualified with neither inherent existence or absence of inherent existence. Qualified with neither.
So you,
And it's within that context that you can posit valid thought.
that door which is unqualified by either lack or the presence of inherent existence, that's the mere door,
Yeah, well,
or approximating it.
mere door, you're getting into, mere door would mean a door that's understood is not inherently existent.
Okay. So that already requires seeing the inherent
Yes,
existence.
seeing the absence of inherent existence, seeing it.
Right.
This is not a preferable state to be in. You know, just referring to door that, you know, you're not thinking about whether it inherently exists or not. You're not thinking about it. It's like a gray area, isn't it really? But our valid thought takes place within this sort of context. So then what is the difference between that and thinking that the door inherently exists? The Dalai Lama gave a weak answer one day of saying, well, it's like you're paying more attention to it. Oh, so then when our mind's hopping around, you know, then, you know, and if you just pay, and if you pay more attention, then you're sucked into inherent existence. You know, it becomes very hard to posit. So this was the position of the Chinese Huashang, who debated with Kamalashila at the end of the 8th century at Samye. And he held that all thought obstructs realization of reality. Just as whether you're bitten by a white dog or a black dog, it doesn't make any difference. Or whether the moon is sun is obscured by a dark cloud or a light cloud. It doesn't make any difference. It's obscured. This is not light clouds that you can see through. It's white clouds, right? Thick white clouds and thick dark clouds. Doesn't make any difference. What you have to do is to stop all thought. That's a very attractive view. Now, in these texts, this whole tendency to view all thought as involving error, as being erroneous, is just like made to be laughable and wrong. So, again, this is a conceptual fork. And what's going to happen when you consider all thought to be conceptions of inherent existence? And what's going to happen when you say that some is and some isn't? You'll get some advantages from doing it this way, some advantages from doing it this way. Now, those people will hold that all thought, all conceptual thought is to be abandoned and is art. and our conceptions of inherent existence, they don't, Buddhists, they don't advocate that you just do whatever you want, right? They have ways within their tradition of sustaining the practice of virtue. And within Gilpa also, with the practice of calm abiding, there are techniques for stopping thought. Some say that adopting virtue and discarding non-virtue are done for the time being in perspective mistaken consciousness. So, he says, there actually are two types. Those that are involved, conceptions of inherent existence. He makes a sharp point. If conceptual consciousnesses are wrongly not treated as having those two types, then the conceptual consciousness of the view and of the class of ethical behavior, mutually would damage each other, like hot and cold. I was at a Hindu ashram once, and one of the students said, "Well, what can we do for, we have to have compassion for people who are involved in these terrible actions." And the, what do you call him? Swami, whom I like very much, said, very appealing, said, "Let them burn." Really, he was carrying out the consequences of separating, in this case, virtue from knowledge of reality. He was in, and I don't know how within his community, within the community you would have ways of restricting what people did and so what, taking vows not to have sex and to engage in meditation at certain times and so forth, right? But it was simply, he just loved it. Let them burn. He may even have said, "Watch them burn." And he really was carrying out the consequences of a system that isn't seeking to wed those two theoretically as much maybe as some of these other systems do. And that'll have its own advantages too. Putting tremendous emphasis on a ground of reality that manifests in all sorts of ways. Virtue, non-virtue, pleasure, pain. In the midst of all of it, there's just reality. There's just basic reality, which, will be true in Buddhism, Hinduism, in both. But it puts tremendous emphasis on wisdom. Also, there'll be no ground, no way So now, if you're going to say virtue, non-virtue, are all exist only for a mistaken consciousness, then how do you know what's mistaken? That's what he's asking. How do you know what's mistaken? What are your grounds for choosing that this is the mistaken consciousness in the face of which all of these things are positive? How are you going to have any grounds for choosing? You yourself are using the word mistaken. So how are you going to know what's mistaken and what's valid? Because you've given up all of this. So that's what this horrible next sentence, we're trying to make it clearer by putting in numbers. Hence, such talk is a creation of darkness. So he's gone off on his conceptual road of seeing. Therefore, those who put forth these positions are holding the position of the opponents. You know, they say, even within Buddhists, within Tibet, within Madhyamakas, within Prasangikas, oh, virtue doesn't ultimately exist, which it doesn't. It's just posited for a mistaken consciousness. And he's saying, you're Nagarjuna and Candrakīrti's opponent, if you hold. So there's a huge mass of people that now he's saying are the opponents of the very ones that they're seeking to explain. And you can see his point of view in his argument. I'm not jumping on this bandwagon and saying, oh, this is the only way of doing it, because I think it's to very clearly see how it's being done. Because I think if you look at many different presentations, you get sort of the same topic from many different perspectives, and it gets deeper. But I don't try to do this by making all of them fuzzy. I want them all to be very clear. Because in that detail is where the help is. In that you only get clarity when you are not trying to make it all fuzzy. Someone was claiming some very special understanding of emptiness. And I don't want to, for the sake of sectarian harmony within Buddhists, claim, it's all the same, But I do have some sort of perspective that it's a different aspect. I just said it, right? Different aspect, different way of getting at the same thing. And I suppose because there's enough for us to talk about, we will never probe what's this same thing that these very distant systems are getting at. But anyway, that's my view. So, beings will gradually attain on page 160, the first ground. In the middle of the indented paragraph, due to wishing to abandon completely the causes for falling into the great abyss of bad rebirths, a circumstance that interrupts their practice of the excellent doctrine, they resort to repentance. They feel sorry for the things they've done, ugly things they've done in the past. And give even what is difficult to give even their own flesh. All sorts of stories of Buddha in his impure, 500 impure and 500 pure lifetimes. Impure lifetimes, I think in the impure, well anyway, in some of those lifetimes of giving his own flesh to animals, which, very low field. Low meaning within the hierarchy, right? Within certain hierarchies, in other ways, any field of merit is high. So I wonder if those stories are at variance with other doctrines that emphasize the importance of giving to religious people and religious organizations and the spread of the Dharma, or if there's some way of subsuming the two, I don't know. They also gather students through the four modes of gathering. The first is the giving of things. If you give food and money and somebody says, oh, I need a pen, and I give them my gold pen that I've kept for 30 years. Oh wow, this guy's nice. You establish a connection. And the others are in the note. Speaking about how to achieve high status within cyclic existence and how to get out of cyclic existence. acting in accordance with what you teach. Yeah. Whoop. So, in the next paragraph, second sentence, through use of a technique that does not undermine ascertainment of dependent arising. That's the core. If you're going to teach about emptiness, you have to teach it in such a way that it doesn't undermine dependent arising. Even if you give people the second chapter of analyzing, going and coming right at the beginning, the first week of the course, emphasize, even though we're not going to find these things, somehow, there's a compatibility with dependent arising. Okay? And in that sort of circumstance, explanation should be given even to those who, though having belief, don't understand it. There's great merit in explaining it, and it goes on to talk in a marvelous way about Manjushri on 161. Whoever listens, even with doubt, thinking, oh, this maybe this is so, to this rendition of teaching generates much greater merit than the Bodhisattva who, lacking realization of emptiness, practices 6 perfections for 100,000 aeons. And then you have a man or a woman in the next one. Oblivion fills worldly realms as numerous as the grains of sand, the banks of the Ganges, the 7 precious objects. Why I call it precious object instead of jewels is gold and silver are included. I forget the 7. Ruby and whatever. And give these to a Buddha, the highest feeling. Wouldn't that man or woman thereby develop much merit or not? Of course that man or woman would. But if you remember merely a stanza of this, you get more merit.
Rather the same kinds of merit?
Same kinds of merit?
I mean, one would be accumulation of wisdom, wouldn't it?
Oh,
The other
good
would be
question. We don't have time to answer.
oh, come on, Jeffrey, twice in one class.
There are 2 requirements on page 162. We're going to finish. A pure motivation toward the end, 3rd paragraph from the end. 2 requirements for when you're teaching, or you're getting the benefits. A pure motivation, not looking for, getting wealth, people serving you, or becoming famous, and explaining it non-erroneously. Therefore, the quote says, persons who explain the doctrine erroneously, or who, having an afflicted mind, such a lousy motivation, explain it out of desire for good services or fame, cause a large amount of their own merit to degenerate. And if we think about why, it's because you're talking about the doctrine that is going to free people from cyclic existence. And like my own motivation is to get more money or fame or whatever, it's polluting it for myself. So next time, we'll go on to your questions about the Jnana Sheva material, Meditation on Emptiness, if you have any. And then excluding the translation, just the introductory part. The part that I assigned includes part of the translation. We won't consider that now. And then we'll pass on to Candrakīrti's text, which I'm sure you've already found is complex.
I believe the class was good. Now that we have sort of treatment at this time, however, the responsible
Yes.
In the
recorded time.
cards,
Seriously,
because
that's
they're
what
generated in
Sure. I mean, it does come in vocabulary-wise.
What? This was the all real, not real one.
Yes, that's in the Trumdashi Lokutema Knig Namsha. And it's quite different. Yes, just it's a very unusual way of handling the form. It's very unusual. You know, Yoga Mayans, you know, Yoga would not be treated, which is why I stopped.